Shalom, beloveds of the King. Praise Abba Yahuwah. Here we are again today, and we are looking at our Torah portions. And wow, is this Torah portion not just as powerful as what you can get? Because this Torah portion, we have got so much to cover. And I just pray that the Father grant me the grace to be able to bring across everything that He is sharing with us in this hour, because there is so much to be able to understand in this Torah portion, in order to be able to show us what it is that He's wanting to be able to say in this hour. Because this is a Torah portion that if you really, even if it's long, please listen to the end, because it is a Torah portion in its entirety, explaining what the Father is doing right now. And this is so powerful because this is the Torah portion of the Shabbat that we've just had, which was on the 1st of December. And this Torah portion, so many things written in it, so many things revealing in it, is really about, the Haftorah is about the raising up of a priesthood, the cleansing of a priesthood, and it's just amazing because without me even having studied the Torah portion, because I was busy with the previous one, so I wasn't looking at this one. And on Shabbat, Friday, Father had me change my people profile picture. And my profile picture says, "Start a fire in my soul, Yah. Fan the flame and make it glow. Make it grow." So it's about a fire having to start in our soul. So amazing on this Torah portion that is when the Father gets me to do this. And then on Shabbat, every Shabbat before we do the teaching, we break bread as a community, as a group of people that come together, that we do the live teachings, and we break bread together. And this Shabbat, Father led me to be able to uproot every plant not planted by Him, and then to be able to replant that which was planted by Him, to plant what He has for us written in our scrolls. And what was so interesting, it was about silencing, uprooting all the weeds in our lives and releasing the prophetic words that He has spoken over our lives. And if we really look at this Torah portion in its entirety, that's exactly what it was with this Yehoshua, the high priest, that Hasatan was accusing him, but he needed to go through a cleansing. And the Father is busy cleansing His people in this hour to raise up His priesthood. So it's so powerful when we look and we see where we are in terms of our timing on the timeline that the Father's got us on, which is absolutely amazing. We are absolutely 100% in line with what the Father is saying. I stand in awe of His prophetic timing and timeline. Let us pray. Abba Yahuwah, I just want to thank You and I just want to praise You for this Torah portion. Please give me the grace that I need, Father, to be able to bring this message across to Your people, for them to understand the seasons and the timings that we are in. Father, this is such a significant Torah portion, and I really pray that You give us the mind of our understanding, that You open up the mind of our understanding, that You open up our eyes, open up our ears, open up our hearts to receive the very word that You're wanting to be able to release in this hour, for us to understand that we are to become a flame, that You will be our cloud by day, that You will be our pillar of fire by night, and that You will come and rebuke Satan on our behalf, and that we will really be a priesthood that can start raising up in the fullness of the things that You have ordained for us in the hour that we find ourselves in. Abba Yahuwah, I pray that You speak through my lips, speak through my mouth, the very oracles that come from your heart. And Father, I thank you that we will be open to receive your promises, your word, and that everything that the enemy has brought in our lives to bring destruction, just like it was with Yehoshua the high priest, that you rebuke Hasatan on our behalves, Father, so that we may receive the fullness of that which you have to give us, so that you cleanse us and purify us, so that we can become this priesthood that you have ordained for this hour, that we would once again return back to our first love, to truly serve you the way that you want to be served. We praise and we thank you for this in Yeshua's name. Amen. And so this Torah portion is Torah portion number 36, and it's Behaalotecha. Behaalotecha. And Behaalotecha is in your ascent when you set up. So it's in your ascent and when you set up. And this is Torah portion from Numbers 8:1 to Numbers 12:16 to chapter 12 verse 16. And the Haftorah is from Zechariah 2:14 to Zechariah 4 verse 7. And we are going to read our very first scripture that is just so significant, and we are going to spend a little bit of time in just these first 4 verses. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you ascend to trim the lamps, let the 7 lamps give light in front of the lampstand." So just in that, so speak to Aaron and say to him, when you ascend to trim the lamps, so they are in the holy place, where you've got the table of showbread, where you've got the lampstand, where you've got the altar of incense. And now he's saying, when you ascend to trim the lamps, let the 7 lamps give light in front of the lampstand. And Aaron, and this is the work, and Aaron did so, and he set up the lamps to face the front of the lampstand, and Yahuwah commanded Moshe. So, when we look at this word, ascend, so when it says, trim the lamps and when you ascend to trim the lamps. So what is that word ascend? That word ascend is to go up, it's to climb, it's to meet, it's to visit, it's to follow, it's to come up, it's to spring up, it's to shoot forth, it's to come up before Yahuwah, it's to bring up, it's to raise up, it's to spring up, it's to a higher place, it's a sacrifice, it's to cause to burn, an ascension to a higher place. So we are to ascend into a higher place. So the Father in this Torah portion is speaking to his remnant bride and saying, it's time for you to ascend. It's time for you to shoot forth. It's time for you to come up. It's time for you to have this visitation. It's time for you to be able to spring up. It's time for you to shoot forth. It's time for you to cause to burn. It's time to come to a higher place. So the Father is calling us into this higher place in this hour. So, beloveds of the King, if the fire is intensifying, it's because he's getting us ready to go higher. And that's why I say it's so interesting, because this was on Friday's Torah portion, and that I changed my people profile in order for me to be able to have this people profile that is saying that caused me to burn, that this was what I said. And on Friday, I changed my profile picture, which I have had since Yom Teruah. And so now it's this new season and the season that we are into, the priests, you see, my first Torah portion, my first people profile, I changed it at Yom Teruah, where it was the rising up of the priesthood. Now we have to start to have the fire to be able to burn in our souls. That Abba Yahuwah will start a fire in our souls, and that He will fan the flame and make it grow. That fire that needs to be in our soul, in our mind, in our will, in our emotions, will come and burn out the dross, but it will come to burn us to be a flame on fire with this love. It's the fire of His love that needs to once again burn in our hearts. And so that's why we need to understand that we've got to climb up. We've got to come up. We've got to shoot forth. We've got to spring up. We've got to raise up. There's going to be a higher sacrifice, another sacrifice, and a higher place that we need to come to. And then the lamps. So it says, so we got to trim the lamps. Those lamps is H5216, which is the word Nair. Nair. And that is to glisten, to light the burner. So it's the burner, it's the glisten, to light. And the root word comes from nur, which is Aramaic, and that is H5135, and that's the root word that it comes from, which means to shine, which means fire, which means fiery, which means flame of fire. So, Abba Yahuwah, the lampstand, this lamps represents Yeshua, and it's the flame of fire. He is the flame of fire, and we are to become this flame of fire. And so, in front, so we are going to be able to give, so Aaron did so, he set up the lamps to face the front. So what is that in front? In front. Give light in front. So that in front is H6440, which means panim. Ponim. And that is face to face. It's the presence. It's in front. It's in the presence of. In the face of. Before the face of. It comes from the root word panah, which is H6437, which means to approach, to turn, to look at, to behold, to look, to mark, to prepare, to regard, to have respect. So you see, we are in front of. So we are going to ascend so that we can become this burning light, this burner, this light, so that we may be able to behold. We may look, we may behold, we may regard, we may have respect, we may see the face and the presence. And then it is the lampstand. So the front of the lampstand. So that lampstand is the menorah. And this is the work of the lampstand. Work. So these lamps are the lamps being put on the menorah. So they were the lamps. The fire of the lamps that was going to burn on top of the menorah. And this lampstand is the menorah, and this is the work of the lampstand, and its work. So it says, and this is the work of the lampstand. So that word work is H4639, and that is the word ma'aseh, which is deeds, which is labor, which is achievements, which is works of deliverance and judgment. A thing made, the work of Yah, and the product. So understand there is works. So you see, we are going through all this process because the Father wants us to bear fruit. Remember, we've been talking about bearing fruit. From the time of Sukkot, He was going to judge our fruit. So what fruit are we bearing? What work are we bearing for the kingdom? What are we busy doing? What work of the kingdom are we busy with? Are we still busy about our little kingdom? Or are we busy with the Father's kingdom? Whose kingdom are we busy building? Are we building our own kingdoms? Or are we about the Father's kingdom? Do we have His kingdom vision in sight? Or are we about our own kingdoms? So, the work, so he says, the work of the lampstand, beaten work. So, beaten work of gold. So, it's the beaten work of gold. Beaten is the word mikshor, H4749. And that's hammered work, rounded work, molded by hammering, upright, whole piece. So understand, this lampstand was beaten, its work, so and this work of the lampstand, so it was work. So we are going to have to produce work by being a lampstand. And how do you become the lampstand? Is the lampstand had to be hammered, it had to be round work, it had to be molded, hammering for it to be upright and a whole piece. So you see, when you start looking at all these words, then you start understanding what is the process that we need to go through. What is this process? And then gold, because why? We need to come out like gold. We need to go through the fire. We need to be purified. We are going to be through this whole process. So I want you to understand, if some of you are in a fiery furnace, then you need to understand it's because you are being raised up to be able to become that priesthood of these last days that He's raising up to carry His gold, His glory. So the gold is a precious metal as a measure of weight, brilliance, splendor, to shimmer and to shine. So we are called to be a shimmer and a shine for Him. And then you get the base. So it was beaten of gold from its base to its blossoms. So it was beaten from its base. What is the base? The base is yarek. From its thigh, its side, its loin, like the thigh or the side of Jacob. That's written in Genesis 32 verse 25. So in Genesis 32 verse 25, it's the same as this word yarek, which is the base, which is the thigh, which is how Jacob needed to have his thigh being struck, that it came out of the socket and that he came out of there with a limp. And then you've got the word blossoms, and this is the beaten work of gold, and its base to its blossoms. It is a beaten work. So what is the blossoms? The blossoms is H6525, and that is the word perach, and it's to bud, sprout, bloom, blossom, flower, to break out, break forth, to flourish, to spring up. So it's so interesting, because just like in when yesterday we were doing our teaching for the Shabbat, and as we broke bread, it was about every plant not planted by Abba Yahuwah needed to be uprooted from our lives. And then He had to replant us with all the words that He has prophesied over our lives. The words that He's written in our scroll is now to bud, is now to bloom, is now to blossom, is now to flourish, it's now to spring up. And that is what I was having to prophesy yesterday. And this is what's so amazing, because I didn't even know that this was the Torah portion. That was the very Torah portion for Shabbat. But this is just to show you how the Father is speaking prophetically on a timeline that man cannot orchestrate. No man can orchestrate this timeline. And then it is beaten work. So we need to be hammered, molded to make a whole piece according to the pattern, because it says according to the pattern which Yahuwah has shown Moshe, so he made the lampstand. So the lampstand had to be made according to the pattern that the Father was showing Moshe for him to be able to beat that lampstand. So we are going to have to be beaten just like Messiah. So everything about what we're reading, about the menorah, about the lamps, about everything is according to what our Messiah represents. And no servant is greater than his master. So this is talking about how the Father is going to hammer us and beat us so that we may be able to become this menorah that's supposed to give his light. And we have to be molded into the right pattern of what we've been created to reflect. We have to reflect our Messiah, and he has a pattern, and he has a scroll written for our lives, and we need to come in line with that scroll, which is the pattern for our life. And that pattern is H4758, which is Mareh, and that is sight, appearance, vision. So you see, I was prophesying yesterday as I was praying, as we were breaking bread, that every prophetic word spoken over our lives, so that is the vision, that is the appearance, that is what is seen, to look up, to look onto, to see. That's what we need to focus on. All the prophetic words that the Father's already spoken over our lives, that is what's going to come forth now. So that is the pattern, that's the sight, that's the appearance, that's the vision, that's the prophetic word, that is seen, to look up, to look on, to see. That's what we need to be able to walk out in our lives. Comes from the root word raha, so that word pattern comes from the root word raha, which is 8700. So this word pattern comes from the root word raha, which is to see, to look at, to inspect, perceive, consider, to learn about, to observe, to watch, give attention to, gaze at, have an experience, take heed, to regard, to share, to think about, to view. So we need to be able to look at the pattern that the Father has already laid out before us. We need to be able to observe it. We need to watch it. We need to experience it. We need to gaze at it. We need to gaze at our Messiah. He's the pattern that we are to follow. So we are to follow Yahushua, who's already the pattern that has been laid before us. So, and what lights up the menorah? It's the oil. Now we look at everything Abba wants to show us from these verses, from these few verses that we've read. Everything about these verses is talking about Yahushua, who is the menorah, the light that became flesh and dwelt among us. But what is it saying about his set-apart priesthood that he is wanting to raise up? Because in Numbers chapter 8, so let's look at Numbers chapter 8 from verses 9. Let's just have a look, and it says, "And you shall bring the Levites before the tent of appointment, and you shall assemble all the congregation of the children of Israel, and you shall bring the Levites before Yahuwah, and the children of Israel shall lay hands on the Levites." So see, Father wants to lay hands, and he wants to anoint and he wants to equip. And Aaron shall wave the Levites before Yahuwah. So these Levites are being presented before Yahuwah in this hour. And you shall wave the Levites before Yahuwah, a wave offering from the children of Israel, so that they be for doing the service of Yahuwah. So there is a priesthood, a company of a priesthood right now that is being raised up and being presented before the Father. And this is exactly what was being done yesterday, that even when we finished, it was about arise and shine, for your light has come, for the glory of Yahuwah has risen upon you. And this is what I said. Father is now setting apart this remnant, and he's wanting to raise them up. And this is the Torah portion that we are in. So we're absolutely on par with what the Father is saying. And the Levites shall lay their hands on the heads of the young bulls, and the one shall be prepared as a sin offering, and the other as an ascending offering to Yahuwah to make atonement for the Levites. And you shall have the Levites stand before Aaron, his sons, and then wave them as a wave offering to Yahuwah. Thus you shall separate the Levites from among the children of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. Then after that the Levites shall go in to do the service in the tent of appointment, and when you have cleansed them and waved them as a wave offering. So they're being set apart right now to be able to be released into the fullness of the work that the Father has ordained for them. For they are given ones, given to me from among the children of Israel. I have taken them for myself instead of all who opened the womb. So instead of him choosing the firstborn, he chose the Levites. And that is why the Father is choosing his remnant bride in this hour, the children of Israel. For all the firstborn are among the children of Israel and are mine, both man, beast. On the day that I struck all the firstborn in the land of Mizraim, I set them apart unto myself. And I have taken the Levites instead of all the firstborn of the children of Israel. And I have given the Levites as a gift to Aaron and his sons from among the children of Israel, to do the service of the children of Israel, in the tent of appointment, and to make atonement for the children of Israel. So you see, these Levites have to make atonement before the Father on behalf of the children of Israel, that there be no plague among the children of Israel when the children of Israel come near the set-apart place. So Father has to raise up his remnant bride in this hour in order to be able to stand in the gap for crying out for mercy, even as the Father is going to bring his judgments, that he will remember mercy, that we are to remind him that he's to be able to, in your judgments, Father, remember mercy. So Abba is raising up a remnant bride, a priesthood that needs to be a light, a menorah that glisters and shines his light, that needs to burn a fire, to be fiery, that needs to be a flame of fire, that this talks about. So what is it talking about? He's raising up so when we had a look at the lamps, the Nahir, which is to shine, fire, fiery, flame of fire, this, and when we have a look at in front, so this, to shine, fire, fiery, flame of fire, this word nur or naur in H5135, which is the root word for the lamps, from glisten to light, the burner. This is, you can tie back to Daniel 3 verse 27, and we are going to look at Daniel 3, and we're going to look at it. We're going to look at these different scriptures. So let's go to Daniel. So we read from Daniel chapter 3, and we read from verses 13, and it says, Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and wrath, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the sovereign. And Nebuchadnezzar spoke and said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my Elohim, and you do not do obeisance to the gold image which I have set up? So they were called to be able to bow before the statue. So in verse 20, he commanded some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the burning furnace of fire. And then from verses 25, he says, we read from, he answered and said, look, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the son of Elah, which is Elah. And so here we see then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning furnace of fire. He spoke and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High, Elah, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire, and the viceroys, the nobles, and the governors, and the sovereign counselors gathered together, seeing these men, on whose bodies the fire had no power, and the hair of their head was not singed, nor were the garments changed, nor did the smell of fire come on them. So here we see, are we willing to bow to the only living Yah? To the only one who is the light, who is the menorah, who is Yahushua? Or are we going to bow to the systems of this world? We need to see him face to face, in front. But how do we get there? We must be beaten, hammered. So we need to see him face to face. So remember, in front. So the root word for lamps, fire, we need to be able to become this lamp, this burner. We're going to have to go through the fiery tests. We have to become a flame of fire so that we can stand in front, panim, which is face to face, before the face to face, that it comes from the root word panah, which is to approach, to turn, to look at, to behold, to look, to prepare, to regard, to have respect. And that is, we need to understand that is, we must be beaten, hammered, and then because we are then going to have to be beaten. It is a beaten work, which is the yarak, which is from its thigh, its side, its loin, like the thigh or the side of Jacob that we see in Genesis chapter 32. Let's go to Genesis chapter 32. Genesis chapter 32 from verses 24. And it says, and Yaakov was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. And when he saw that he did not overcome him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Yaakov's hip was dislocated as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. But he said, I am not letting you go until you have blessed me. So he asked him, what is your name? And he said, Yaakov. Yaakov meaning deceiver, meaning supplanter. And he said, your name is no longer called Yaakov, but Israel, because you have striven with Eloah and with men and have overcome. And Yaakov asked him, saying, please let me know your name. And he said, why do you ask about my name? And he blessed him there. And Yaakov called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen Eloh's face. I have seen Eloah face to face, and my life is preserved. And the sun rose on him as he passed over Penuel, and he climbed on his hip, and he limped on his hip. So we need to wrestle with Yeshua because we, like Jacob, are deceived, we are supplanters, and we are in deception. And we need to surrender to Him in our ways, even in our pain, our hurt, where we justify ourselves. Do we allow Him to beat us down? Do we allow Him to be able to come and beat us and hammer us down, to be stripped from our identity, that which we are made up of, have our own name changed by Him? He will bless us, so we no longer deceived, but now we behold Him face to face. We become true Israel, which we become. So, what is Israel? Israel means one who will rule with Him and overcome with Him, to be straight. So what is that? Overcome? To be straight, to be just, to be lawful, to be pleasing, to be straightforward, to be upright, to be led. This is, and the true character of Israel is Yasharal, and Yasharal is to be upright. That is what it means to be Yasharal. To be Yasharal means to be straight, to be just, be lawful, be pleasing, to be straightforward, to be upright, to be led. This is the true character of Israel, which is what Israel means, Yasharal. So then we become Yasharal, which is upright one. Then we become the blossoms that start to bud, break forth, to flourish, to spring forth, and become the new creation that He needs to come forth. So if we don't go through this beaten process, if we don't become a flame of fire, if we don't allow the Father's fire in our lives of purification so that we can become the gold, so that we can become one that purified by gold, that will conform to the pattern, to the image of Yeshua, because the one who's living in us is transforming us into His image. We need to be transformed into the image of Messiah Yahushua. So that is why we become a new creation that He needs to bring forth, to birth, to come forth. And that's why we look at Isaiah. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 43. And he says, do not remember the former events. So if there's any of us that are still remembering the things of the past and what has been done to us, and we're still licking our wounds, and we're still going through our rejection because we are not over these issues, and we're still holding on to our pain and our hurt, and this is the thing that the Father is dealing severely with me at the moment, because every time I'm being rejected, every time I speak, and then people reject me, people betray me, people come up against me, I go into that place of where the rejection comes up in me, and then it flares up everything from the wounds that are there. And now the Father is saying, I need to bring this fire to burn this out of you once and for all, so that you don't go there, so that you walk in the fullness, because you cannot be an emotional being. You have to become a spiritual being. And a spiritual being is not going to allow its mind, its will, and its emotions to get in the way of that which the Father wants to do. Because a spiritual being hears the voice of the Messiah and is following the Messiah. And so he says, do not remember the former events, nor consider the events of old. See, I'm doing what is new. Let it now spring forth. Do you not see it? I am even making a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. The beasts of the fields esteem me, the jackals and the ostriches, because I have given water in the wilderness and rivers in the desert to give drink to my people, my chosen, the people I have formed for myself. Let them relate my praise. So the Father is going to raise up a people for Himself, one that is going to relate his praise. They will be his priests, praising him, going ahead. The Levites that were called to praise and worship ahead of the battle to be able to face the enemy and to bring glory and honor to the Father. Matthew chapter 16, verses 24. Let's go to Matthew chapter 16. In Matthew chapter 16, verses 24, it says, when Yahushua said to his taught ones, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his stake and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life shall lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake shall find it. For what is a man profited if he gains all the world and loses his own life? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his life? So many people are pursuing the things of this world, pursuing the lusts of their flesh to the expense of the things of the kingdom. They spend more time in the things of the flesh than what they spend in the things of the kingdom. And for if he loses his own life, or what shall a man give in exchange for his life? For the Son of Adam is going to come in his glory and his esteem of his Father with his messengers, and then he shall reward each one according to his works. So you see, we need to have the works. Truly I say to you, there are some, so according to his works, we stop there at verse 27. We need to follow him, deny ourselves and follow him, and go and do what he has ordained, what is written in our scroll. That is what we're supposed to be walking out. But many of us are still in rebellion against the Father's way, because we either after the lust of our flesh, or we either licking our wounds, or we either have unforgiveness, unrepentant hearts, rebellious hearts. We are not willing to surrender. We are not allowing ourselves to be filled with the Spirit of Yahuwah and be led by the Spirit of Yahuwah. There are people that are filled by the Spirit of Yahuwah, but very few people that are really being led by the Ruach of Yahuwah. So John chapter 12, let's go to John chapter 12, verses 24, and it says, truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. So you see, the more we are dying in our flesh man, the more we are surrendering to the Father and to his way, the more fruit we're going to bear. But if we resist him and we're not willing to surrender, and we are still trying to do things out of our own flesh, and we're still trying to shine out of our own, and we're not truly submitted and surrendered to him, he will not take you past your last disobedience. You will stay stuck. And at the end of the day, he's not going to do this mighty work with you if you are going to stay in that place of rebellion against the Father. Because those that rebelled against the Father stayed in the wilderness and they never entered into the promised land. He who loves his life shall lose it. So if you're still trying to be about your own life, you're going to lose it. And he who hates his life in this world shall preserve it for everlasting life. So we got to understand, we have not been created for ourselves and for our kingdom and for our little lives, and it's only about me and my little life and my little family. It's not about that. You are about the Father's kingdom. You are to lay down your life. You are to lay down your family. You are to lay down everything and follow him. That's what he said. For the one who lays down his mother, his father, his brother, his children, his brother, sister, all for the sake of the kingdom. But people are still making it about what? Me, myself, and I, and my family. No, it's about the greater work that the Father's got for you to do that is beyond what you can see right now. But if you do not surrender, you are never going to see the greater work that He's got for you to do. If anyone serves me, let him follow me. So you see, he who loves his life shall lose it, and he who hates his life in this world shall preserve it for everlasting life. So you're going to go through hardships. You're going to go through trials to the point that you're almost going to hate your life. Why? Because it's not going to be easy. It's going to be persecution. It's going to be hardships. It's going to be trials. If anyone serves me, let him follow me. And where I am, there my servant also shall be. If anyone serves me, the Father shall value him. Now I myself am troubled, and what shall I do? Father, save me from this hour. But for this reason, I came to this hour. So you see, we will be praying and saying, oh Father, please deliver me. Oh Father, please save me from this hour. No, for this very hour you have been created. For this very trial and this very test that you're going through, you have been created. So then why would we want to complain? And I know I'm speaking to the converted here because this is just where I find myself. Maybe you're not there, but this is where I am. So a kernel of wheat is going to have to die and fall to the ground. We are born for such a time as this. We might have to die for his sake. Which church speaks about the menorah? So let's look and see. Which church is the one that is speaking about the menorah? And does it tie up with what Abba is saying to his remnant bride for this prophetic time? What is he saying to his remnant bride in this prophetic time according to one of the churches? Because the churches all had the menorah, but to each church he had a different thing to say. So let's look at the church of Ephesus. So we are going to go to Revelation chapter 2. And we are going to read from Revelation chapter 2 from verses 1 to 7. And it says, to the messenger of the assembly of Ephesus, write, he who is holding the 7 stars in his right hand. So you see, this is where it starts. He who is holding the 7 stars in his right hand, who is walking in the midst of the 7 golden lampstands, says this. So he's walking between the 7 golden lampstands, and that because each one is a different thing. So if we have a look to the assembly of Pergamos, he says, he who has the sharp two-edged sword says this. So he who has to the messenger of the assembly of Pergamos, right, he who has the sharp two-edged sword says this. But this is the one that is walking in the midst of the 7 golden lampstands, says this. So this is about the 7 golden lampstands. And what does he say? I know your works. So you see, it's a church that has to do works. I know your works and your labor and your endurance, and that you are not able to bear evil ones. So we know about all the falsehood, and we know about all the evil ones, and we have tried those who say they are emissaries and are not, and have found them false. So you see, we know all these false prophets and false apostles because we have the truth. We are this church that knows the truth. So I would really say that this church is really, really pointing to the Messianic movement. The Messianic movement has been able to snuff out all this falsehood. They have endured persecution by their brothers, by coming out of the lie, and all of this. And you have been bearing up and have endurance. So we've endured through the persecution of what we've had to go through, and labored for my name's sake, and have not become weary. But I'll hold this against you. So you see, this church, that's why I'm saying, this church of Ephesus is the Messianic movement that's become very learned. They have the truth in the word. They know the word. They know how to be able to snuff out the false from the truth. And they have, they've labored in being able to really get to know the Father, and they've had this relationship with him, and they're seeking him, and they know the truth. But he has this against them. But I hold this against you, that you have left your first love. So what is this word left? This word left is the word afiyami, afiyami, afiyami. To depart, to disregard, to leave, to neglect. Leave something behind, to abandon, to separate, forsake. So you see, they have forsaken that first love of the Father for all the knowledge that they have obtained, because eventually they are all about the doctrines, and now we want to go deeper and deeper into more learning and more learning and more learning, and it's all just puffing them up. All this learning. But at the end of the day, where is their first love with the Father? They forsake it. Why? Because all the time that they take, all this time that they have, is just being put into more learning. More learning. What's the point of learning everything that you have learned and you don't put it into practice? What is the point of learning all these things, and yet at the end of the day, what is it going to profit you if you're going to land up losing and forsaking your relationship because you're spending all your time in all this learning, but yet you have forsaken your relationship with Him? So that means you depart, you disregard, you leave, you neglect. So you neglect your relationship with Him because all you are about is the learned things. And unfortunately, this is where so many people of the Torah movement, I'm seeing them fall away before my very eyes. I'm seeing people that were so close to the Father in terms of their relationship with Him that have now going deeper and deeper into doctrines, more and more learned doctrines. They can't get enough. And the more they go into that, eventually they're going to go into Judaism, because that's what it's going to lead them into. And then eventually they're going to land up denying their Messiah. Because why? They forsook their first love. So what is this first love? The one we were fond of, in love with, affection. And how do we show Him that we love Him? So you see, we lose that affection. We lose that affection for Him. We lose that love that we have for Him. We have more love for all the knowledge that we obtain, more than we actually have a love for Him and being obedient to Him and to His word. So we're obtaining all this knowledge, but yet at the end of the day, we're not being obedient to Him. And so in John 14, verse 15, it says, if you love me, you will keep my commands. You will keep my commands from Genesis to Revelation. Not you only keep my commands of the 10 commandments. If there is no commands, how can you have the fullness of Yeshua? That is why, if we are loving Him, we will obey His commands, and He will be the one who helps us to overcome, and we will eat from the tree of life. So the only way that you're going to be eating from the tree of life is if we obey His commands. And His commands is not just the 10 commandments. If He says that we are to crucify our flesh and we are to have no idols before Him, what does that mean? And that's why right now we're working through the 10 commandments and lining them up to the 7 days of creation, lining them up to the 10 plagues, so that we understand this very clearly. And so that we may then be able to be those that eat from the tree of life, because only those doing His commandments are going to eat from the tree of life. So Revelation 2 verse 7 says, he who overcomes, one who overcomes. So what does it say, Revelation 2 verse 7? He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. To him who overcomes, I shall give to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise. So they need to overcome. They need to overcome the flesh. They need to overcome the doctrines of demons. They need to overcome the pride of life. They need to overcome rejection. They need to overcome pride and arrogance. They need to overcome rebellion. They need to overcome many things in their lives. And they need to be obedient to the Father's word. They need to be obedient to the Father's commands. So to overcome is the word nikal. And that word nikal is H3528. And it's to conquer, to hold fast, to the faith, even unto death. So see, if you do not love him above your own life, if you're still about your own life and doing your own thing, I tell you now, you will not lay down your life for him, because you're still trying to save your own life. It's easy to have lip service. It's easy to say, oh Father, I love you above everything, until your family is removed from you. When your family is removed from you, like when I was in Israel and my family was removed from me for 4 months that I didn't see my husband, 7 months, 8 months that I didn't see my children, it was only then that I really knew the idols that was in my heart. You can think that it's not an idol until you are confronted to see, are you willing to lay them down? Are you willing to be able to sacrifice them on an altar to the Father? To conquer, to hold fast, to the faith even unto death, to prevail, it's to hold on to our faith, even if temptation and persecution comes. So when we are being tempted, when we are still going to hold on to the faith that we have in him. When we are being tried, when we are being tested, we will hold on to the faith, even unto death. Matthew chapter 22 verses 14 says, so we need to overcome. In Matthew chapter 22 verses 14, I'm not going to go there, it says, many are called, but few are chosen. But that word chosen is 1588, which is ekletos. And the root word of ekletos is 1586, which is eklegomai, and that is to choose, to make a choice. Choose, chosen is also elect, which means to choose. We must choose to obey him and to surrender to him. He wants a set-apart priesthood that is surrendered unto him. And it's your choice to surrender. He's not going to choose. You see, we have misunderstood that word. Many are called, few are chosen, which means Father is choosing. Yes, Father is choosing when you have made a choice to choose him, to surrender to him, to obey him. So in 1 Peter 1, let's just go to 1 Peter 1. 1 Peter 1 verses 13 to 16 says, therefore, having girded up the loins of your mind, being sober, set your expectation perfectly upon the grace, the favor that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Yeshua Messiah. As obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lusts in your ignorance, instead, as the one who called you is set apart, so you also should become set apart in all behavior. So you see, that one was a difficult one. Listen to what he says. So that we become set apart in all behavior, which means our behavior must become set apart unto the Father, which means our emotions must become set apart unto the Father. So that is where the challenge comes, that our emotions, where we are still allowing ourselves to go into rejection, to go into whatever, and we get frustrated and we get upset and all these things, that's our behavior. And our behavior must become set apart unto the Father. And this is the area where the Father is really dealing with me. He says, my child, you cannot become set apart in your will. You cannot become set apart in your mind without becoming set apart in your behavior, in your emotions. And so this is the area where the Father is going to deal with us. So first he deals with your will. You've got to lay down your will. But then you've got to start laying down your thought pattern. Do not allow the enemy to come and attack you in your thought pattern. See the tests that come your way. That's why I ask him all the time, Father, show me the test that I may overcome this. That it's not about the person, it's about me. What are you trying to show me? What am I having to deal with? Don't worry about what the person's doing to me. Worry about what's going on in my life and my emotions and my mind and my everything. Because that's where I'm failing tests. Because I want to look at the person, but I'm not looking at me. So instead, as obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lusts in your ignorance, but instead, as one who is called one who called you is set apart, so you also should be set apart in all behavior, because it has been written, be set apart, for I am set apart. So there we understand that as he's set apart, we are called to be set apart. So 1 Peter 1 verse 22 says, now that you have cleansed your lives in obeying the truth. So see, we can only cleanse our lives when we are being obedient to the truth of his word. Through the Spirit, to unfeigned brotherly love, love one another fervently with a clean heart. So how do we love one another? Is there really love within the body for one another? No, because there's backbiting, backstabbing, unforgiveness in the body of Messiah, because this one offended me by what they said, or this one did this to me, and therefore I'm offended. And this is the problem that we're having. And therefore there's no brotherly love. But you see, we are to be able to be obedient to the truth through the Spirit. But you see, this is why in the last days, brother's going to turn against brother. Why? Because they've taken offense. And then when they take offense, they don't want to fellowship with those people. And therefore, they break away from the fellowship of fellowshipping with those people. Because why? Because I don't want to be around them. Why don't I want to be around them? Because the things that they say is not what I want to hear. And this is the problem. This is the problem. Because the heart is not clean. This is why. Because it says, when you are obedient, you will be fervently with a clean heart. So you've got to purify the heart. But if the heart is still wicked and doesn't want to submit and surrender to the Father, it is a rebellious, callous heart. And this is the problem that we have. So we go back to our Numbers chapter 9. And in Numbers chapter 9, from verses 14, Numbers chapter 9, from verse 14, and it says, and when a stranger sojourns among you, then he shall perform the Pesach of Yahuwah. He shall do so according to the law of the Pesach and according to its right ruling. And you have one law, both for the stranger and to the native of the land. And on the day that the dwelling place was raised up, the cloud covered the dwelling place, the tent of the witness, from evening until morning, and it was above the dwelling place like the appearance of fire. So here we understand that there is one law, both for the native and for Israel. So we are grafted in, and we are to keep his Passover, we are to keep his feasts. Not, oh, I'm going to keep Easter, and I'm going to keep Christmas, because I'm a Christian, and they are Jews. There's no longer Jew nor Gentile. There's now one body in Messiah, and we are to keep what he kept. We are to follow him. So whatever he did, we do. It's a law forever throughout your generations. It has not changed. And then Numbers chapter 10, from verses 8, it says, and the sons of Aaron, the priests, blow with the trumpets, and it shall be to you for a law forever throughout your generations. And when you go into battle in your land against the enemy that distresses you, then you shall shout with the trumpets, and you shall be remembered before Yahuwah your Elohim, and you shall be saved from your enemies. So praise the Father, the Levites went ahead and they used their shofars in order to shout a trumpet sound against the enemy, and the Father will release his angels to be able to fight the battle on our behalf. They were shouting with the shofars, blowing the shofars, praising and worshipping, walking around the walls of Jericho 7 times, and those walls came tumbling down, and they never went into any battle. They battled. The battle was in the spiritual realm. The battle wasn't in the physical realm. And then verse 10 says, and in the day of your gladness, and in your appointed times, and in the beginning of your new moons, you shall blow the trumpet over your ascending offerings, and over your slaughterings of peace offerings, and they shall be a remembrance for you before Elohim. I am your Elohim. So we are to blow the shofar at the appointed times, when we are going to have the Sabbaths of the appointed times. On the beginning of the new moons, we are to be able to blow our shofar. Numbers 11 verse 1, it says, and it came to be when the people were as complainers, it was evil in the ears of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah heard it, and his displeasure burned, and the fire of Yahuwah burned against them, and consumed those in the outskirts of the camp. So they start complaining. They don't have meat. They want meat to eat, and we are not to complain, or else the fire of his displeasure is going to consume us. So we better not be complainers, because the more we complain, the more the fire of his purification is going to have to come upon us. Numbers 11:4-5 is very interesting, because it says, and the mixed multitude who were in the midst lusted greatly. So the children of Israel also wept again and said, who is giving us meat to eat? We remember the fish which we ate, which without cost in Mitzrayim, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, and the onions and the garlic. So now, you see, this is why we are to come out of the mixed seed, because they will contaminate us. It's the same as people. Why does brother turn against brother? Why is there division in the body? Because it just takes one bad apple. It just takes one person to speak up against a person that person listens to, that then contaminates their thought patterns, contaminates their heart, and then they turn against the person because of one bad apple. If you've got one rotten apple in a bowl, that one rotten apple will contaminate the whole lot if you don't remove the bad apple out of the camp. It will contaminate everything. Why? That's what happened with the leprosy. If a person was going to Lashon Hara, they had to be put out of the camp. Why? Because it would contaminate the whole camp. Because when a person got leprosy, it contaminated everybody else. So that's what happens when someone listens to somebody that's breaking down another person, that's coming down and coming up against people, coming up against ministries, coming up against servants of Yahuwah. And this is what this Torah portion is also about Aaron, and about Aaron and Miriam standing against Moshe. And so we need to be able to come out of the mixed seed, because that which was being spoken in their ears, they started to allow the mixed multitudes to entice them to also complain against the Father. So in Numbers chapter 11 verses 33, it says, the meat was still between their teeth before it was chewed, and the wrath of Yahuwah burned against the people, and Yahuwah struck the people with an exceeding great plague. Then it came, and it was, and so because of their complaining, because of their lust of their flesh, we pray prayers. You see, they were praying for the meat, they were praying for the quail, they were praying for everything. We pray prayers. Abba gives us what we want, At what expense? At what expense? Some prayers go against his will. And then he gives us what we want. At what expense? Like King Hezekiah. He gave him 15 years of life, but what did he get for it? He landed up allowing the house of Israel to go into exile for 70 years. And at the end of the day, he died a wicked king. Numbers chapter 12. We are now going to look at Numbers chapter 12 from verses 1 to 9. And it says, And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moshe because of the Cushite woman whom he had taken, for he had taken a Cushite woman. And they said, Has Yahuwah spoken only through Moshe? Has he not also spoken through us? And Yahuwah heard it. And the man, Moshe, was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth. So you see, you've got these humble servants of the Father that are just humbly trying to do what the Father has called them to do. They are submitted, surrendered to the Father, doing what the Father's called them to do. But then there comes these arrogant people that want to speak up against them, that want to be able to come and speak and say, well, the Father doesn't only use them. The Father also uses us. The Father is the one who chooses the leader that he chooses. We don't choose the leaders. He chooses the leaders. And therefore, we are to be able to be obedient to the leaders that he chooses, because it's not you that chose. He chose. And he doesn't take it very well if you are going to speak up against the leadership that he's put there. And so we have to be very, very careful, extremely careful, because at the end of the day, look at what happens. And this is what Lashon Hara does. And the man Moshe was very humble. And then it says in verse 6, and he said, hear now my words. If your prophet is of Yahuwah, I make myself known to him in a vision, and I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moshe. He is trustworthy in my house. I speak with him mouth to mouth, because Moshe wasn't just getting dreams and visions. Moshe wasn't a prophet that was getting visions and dreams. Moshe was a prophet that heard the voice of the Father and spoke what the Father told him to speak. And plainly, and not in riddles. He spoke straight as the Father was giving it to him. And he sees the form of Yahuwah. So why were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moshe? The fear of Yahuwah needs to come upon those that will speak up against the servants of Yahuwah, because at the end of the day, judgment will come upon those people. And the displeasure of Yahuwah burnt against them, and he left. Especially when Moshe didn't do anything wrong. You've got to understand, when the servants of Yahuwah hasn't done anything wrong, but you, because of your own hurt, because of your own rejection, because of your own pain, because of that which is within you, there's a difference in you being able to call something out. Because, for example, if the false prophets are speaking things that are false, you to call it out. But for you to be able to speak up against a servant of Yahuwah who hasn't done you any harm, who hasn't done anything to you, who is serving the Father, who is humbly doing what the Father's asking them to do, who is being obedient to what the Father's got for you to do, and you go and speak up against them, what have you done? What have you done? You need a fear. Because what happened to Miriam? She was put out of the camp with leprosy. And it took Moshe to be able to pray on her behalf. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, let us read 1 Corinthians chapter 10 for us to be able to understand the warning that the Father is giving us in this day. We are going to read from verse 1. For I do not wish you to be ignorant, brothers, that all our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea. So they were all under the cloud and they all passed under the sea. And all were immersed into Moshe in the cloud and in the sea. And all ate the same spiritual food, and all ate the same spiritual drink, for they drank of the spiritual rock that followed, and the rock was Messiah. Just like Noah's brothers and sisters, they lived in the same house, they heard the same message, they knew the teaching that was coming by, Noah's father, and they were being taught the ways of the Father, his brothers and his sisters, together with Noah. But, however, With most of them, Eloah was not well pleased, for they were laid low in the wilderness. So you see, the same as with Noah's household, Noah was being obedient to hear what the Father was telling him to do, and Noah was doing exactly, following the leading of the Father, doing exactly what the Father was telling him to do. But what were the brothers in the camp doing? They lived in the same house. They were in the same house. But what were they busy doing? And these became examples for us, so that we should not lust after evil, as those indeed lusted. So you see, the same as those in Noah's house, instead of them being obedient to what was being taught them, they were lusting after the things of the flesh. They were lusting after the things of the world. They were more concerned about the things of the world than what they were about the kingdom of the Father. Do not become idolaters, as some of them, as it has been written. The people sat down to eat and to drink and stood up to play. Neither should we commit whoring, this as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. Neither let us try Messiah, as some of them also tried, and were destroyed by serpents. Neither grumble, as some of them also grumbled, and were destroyed by the destroyer. And all these came upon them as examples, and they were written as a warning to us, on whom the ends of the ages have come, so that he who thinks he stands, let him take heed lest he fall. No trial has overtaken you, except such as is common to man, and Eloah is trustworthy, who shall not allow you to be tried beyond what you are able, but with the trial shall also make the way of escape, enabling you to bear it. So you have to bear it and overcome it. And be careful, lest you think you stand so right before the Father, but lest you fall. So Zechariah, if we have a look at Zechariah, our Haftorah is Zechariah. So let us go to Zechariah chapter 3, and in Zechariah chapter 3 from verses 1 to 8, and it says, And he stood, and he showed me Yehoshua the high priest standing before the messenger, and Yahuwah and Satan standing at his right hand to be an adversary to him. And Yahuwah said to Satan, Yahuwah rebuke you, Satan. Yahuwah, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked from the fire? And Yehoshua was dressed in filthy garments and was standing before the messenger. And he answered and spoke to those who stood before him, saying, Remove the filthy garments from him. And to him he said, See, I have removed your guilt from you, and shall put costly robes on you. So this is the priesthood, being cleansed, being removed, all that stands in the way, all the accusations of the enemy, all the seed. This is everything that I was praying yesterday over this remnant bride, uprooting everything that is not of the Father in their lives, removing this dirty garment from them. And I said, Let him put a clean turban on his head. Let them put a clean turban on his head. And let them put a clean turban on his head. And they put clean garments on him. And the messenger of Yahuwah stood by. And the messenger of Yahuwah witnessed to Yehoshua, saying, Thus says Yahuwah of hosts. Now listen to what he says. If you walk in my ways, and if you guard my duty, then you shall rule my house. Then you become a priest. And also guard my courts. And I shall give you access among these standing here. You shall then become the royal priesthood, and you shall be seated with Yeshua in heavenly places. You shall be reigning and ruling with him in the kingdom to come. In Zechariah 4, verses 2 to 3, and it says, And he said to me, What do you see? So I said, I have looked and see a lampstand of gold with a bowl on top of it, and on the stand 7 lamps with 7 sprouts to 7 lamps, and 2 olive trees are by it, one at the right of the bowl and the other at its left. So, and this is where he says, not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit, says Yahuwah. So the Father, not by might, not by power, but by His Spirit, is raising up these two houses, the two olive trees, the house of Israel, the house of Judah, to become one house, which will become the remnant bride of Revelation chapter 7, where He's going to seal them off. He's raising up His 12 tribes. He's sealing them off with His name, and they will follow the Lamb wherever He goes, and in their mouth is found no falsehood. So, 1 Peter 1, as we start closing off, in 1 Peter 1, let's go to 1 Peter, we're back in Peter. 1 Peter 1, verses 1 to 2 says, Kepha, an emissary of Yahushua Messiah, to the chosen strangers of the dispersion, chosen according to the foreknowledge, chosen from the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia, chosen according to the foreknowledge of Yahuwah the Father, set apart by the Spirit unto obedience. So we're being set apart unto obedience and the sprinkling of the blood of Yeshua Messiah. Favor and peace be increased to you. Now, 1 Peter 2, verses 1 to 5. 1 Peter 2, verses 1 to 5 says, having put aside then, this is what we need to do. So it's not just keeping the commands, it's having to put aside all evil, all deceit, and hypocrisies, envying, jealousies, evil words, newborn babes, desire the unadulterated milk of the word, in order that you grow by it. If indeed you have tasted that the Master is good. So you see, the word is to come to make you grow and to be able to make you walk in it. It doesn't help you to get all this word, all this knowledge, and you're never putting it into practice. Drawing near to Him, a striving stone, rejected indeed by men, but chosen by Yahuwah and precious. You also, as living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, a set-apart priesthood, to offer up spiritual slaughter offerings acceptable to Yahuwah through Messiah Yahushua. So He's raising up a royal priesthood that He says in 1 Peter 2 verse 9, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a set-apart nation, a people for a possession, that you should proclaim the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light, who once were not a people. So we were not a people. We were not His chosen people in terms of maybe by circumcision, in terms of being the original olive tree, but not a people, but now the people of Yahuwah, who had not obtained compassion, but now obtain compassion. So, there we go. And then we finish off with Hebrews chapter 3 as a warning to us, because the Father wants to bring us a warning in Hebrews chapter 3. So, we go read in Hebrews chapter 3 from verse 7, and it says, therefore, as the set-apart Spirit says, today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts, as in the rebellion, in the day of trial, in the wilderness, where your fathers tried me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years. Therefore, I was grieved with that generation. And I said, they always go astray in their hearts, and they have not known my ways. As I swore in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest, look out, brothers, lest there be in any of you a wicked heart of unbelief in falling away from the living Yahuwah. But encourage one another daily while it's still called today, lest any of you be hardened by the deceivableness of sin. For we have become partakers of Messiah if we hold fast the beginning of our trust firm to the end. While it is said, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. For who having heard, rebelled? Was it not all who came out of Mitzrayim, led by Moshe? And with whom was he grieved 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpse fell in the wilderness? And whom did he swear that they would not enter into his rest, but to those who did not obey? So at the end of the day, the Father speaks to us and says that we are to come into obedience. We are to submit, to surrender, allow him to do the deep work in our lives so that he can raise up this holy priesthood, that we ascend, that we come up higher, that we come and kneel in the face of the Father, allow him to do the beaten work in us, allow him to be able to allow us to become a light that needs to shine his glory, that we will become a blossom that is to be birthed, bring forth new life for him. May Abba Yahuwah bless you. Let us pray. Abba Yahuwah, I praise you and I thank you for this word, Father. I pray that this word will fall on good soil and that it produces the harvest. Thank you yesterday, Father, that you already prophetically had me proclaim this word so that we would uproot every plant that is not planted by you, so that we can be that priesthood that can start arising and shining and coming forth. And for such a time as this, we have been created to shine your light. So Abba Yahuwah, I pray, give us the grace that we need to be able to allow our inner man to be healed and delivered by you, so that we can become willing and obedient servants to you. In Yahushua's name I pray this. Amen.